Hi, decision science students. I've put together a short video for you just to show you how to put together a consistency matrix. Some students already submitted their consistency matrix, and I picked up some common errors which I think I should address before you all submit so that I don't have to be addressing the same thing, or you don't have to lose marks for something that you can address before you submit. So let's look at this consistency matrix that was submitted by one of the students. First, research problem objective needs to be stated here. The student didn't state any objective. So what you need to state here is the overarching, what's the word, overarching objective or the main objective of your research. You need to state it here. And then after this, now you need to subdivide it. That is, if you've got subdivisions, you need to subdivide it into now sub-aims or problems. So now you take the bigger problem, you make it into smaller pieces. That's what you put under sub-problem or sub-aim. Okay, and then here you put the literature where you got the information that suggests that this is the problem. So you put that literature here, and the hypothesis that you've put in here, you will have got some ideas from literature. You put that literature. You don't have to put a lot of it, just the core ones, the key articles that you read that supports this or that led you to make a decision to do this analysis. So your hypothesis testing, then you list here, you say what you believe. So there's a problem. This is what you believe you're going to find or what you want to find at the end of the day. So you hypothesize here. And then your research questions, then you frame this in a question format as to what question you want to answer. And then you state the variables. So when you state all these statements, there are variables within them. So here you've got intellectual capital, you've got intention, and you've got startup. So we expect those variables to appear here. And the same variables that appears under hypothesis, we expect the same variables to appear in the research question and the same variables to appear under your variables. So the two variables you have here, one of it, you will label it as an independent variable. That is that one V stands, IV stands for, and you state one as the dependent variable. And you say in your questionnaire, which questions did you answer to collect information about independent variable 1 and about dependent variable 1. So you say the question numbers here. So if the type of data that you used was as a Likert scale or ordinal data, so we expect that variable 1, independent variable 1, will have about a minimum of 3 questions, and independent variable 2, dependent variable 2, if it's also Likert scale, you'll have a minimum of 3 questions. So we expect here we'll have question 1 up to 6, which is 3 here, 3 here. But if it's continuous data, then you'll have 1 question or whatever the number of questions you'll have. And here you state which statistical method you're going to use to analyze the relationship or whatever that you will have stated under your hypothesis. So I've made some few comments here on what is lacking from this student's hypothesis 1. Let's go and look into detail now in terms of framing the hypothesis. Let's look at her hypothesis 2. So she says here, the aim is to determine if there is a relationship between intellectual capital, so intellectual capital is a variable 1, and startup, which startup is supposed to be variable 2. And then she says, and the type of relationship that exists between intellectual capital and internships. She's introducing another variable here, which is internships, which did not appear in the relationship, but it appears when now she talks about the type of relationship. So there's misalignment there. And then you look at the hypothesis. She says there is a strong positive relationship between intrapreneurial self-efficacy. Okay, let's continue. So hypothesis 2, she says there is a strong positive relationship between intrapreneurial self-efficacy, human capital, and social capital. She's got 3 variables here: intrapreneurial self-efficacy 1, human capital 2, social capital 3. It's not clear as to whether she's testing the relationship between intrapreneurial self-efficacy and human capital, or intrapreneurial self-efficacy and social capital, or human capital and social capital. So these statements needs to be refined so that it is clear. Most of the time you find with hypothesis, it tends to be bivariate. You tend to have 2 variables. So if you've got another extra variable you want to test, you can either make a sub hypothesis. So you'll have hypothesis 2A, hypothesis 2B if they are linked, or just make another hypothesis altogether. And then you come here, you look, she's got a question that says, what is the relationship between self-efficacy? Okay, she's got self-efficacy here, but she doesn't have self-efficacy there. And then she says human capital. She's got human capital here. She doesn't have human capital here, but she's got intellectual capital. So if she's putting human capital under intellectual capital, she needs to be clear here to say under intellectual capital, I'll test human capital. So there's misalignment again, inconsistency. And then she says firm growth. You go to the hypothesis, there's no firm growth. You go to the sub-aim, there's no firm growth. So she has introduced a new variable, which is firm growth, that is not consistent with the hypothesis and the sub-aim. So she needs to relook at this. Now you come to the variable. She says independent variable is monitoring. She has no variable called monitoring in any of the 3. And then she's got intrapreneurial education. She's got no variable called intrapreneurial education from the other 3 statements. And then don't use synonyms as well. If intrapreneurial education is human capital or it is intellectual capital, use one construct. Don't use synonyms because then it suggests inconsistencies. So that intrapreneurial education needs to be clarified which of these variable it is intrapreneurial education. And then now she introduced another concept, moderating variable, intrapreneurial self-efficacy, which is not hypothesized here. So if you want to do moderation, introduce another hypothesis to say you will look at the moderating effect of intrapreneurial self-efficacy to which variable. We have 2 stages moderating which variable. So this needs to either be a different hypothesis or a sub for these 2 if self-efficacy is moderating human capital or social capital, whatever that is. So these variables needs to reflect what the questions were and needs to reflect what the hypotheses were and needs to reflect what the sub-aim was or objective was. So you can't introduce new variables here. Same the questions now, she's asking questions about monitoring. She's asking questions about metacognitive, which this construct does not appear in any of these different statements that she has. So this must have the same constructs that you had here, same construct you had here, and same construct from here. And then if it's ordinal data, then we expect that if you've got 2, you'll have 3 times 2 minimum variables. You introduce another moderating, you'll have a set of questions as well asking about the moderating effect. And then lastly, then she's looking at the statistical techniques she's going to use. So if you are testing relationship, we expect to see some correlation. If there was influence, we'll expect to also see some regression. And then because you've got Likert scales, then the reliability and validity then becomes also important. But even if you don't state these ones are fine, we want the key one that you will use to test the specific one. So that is how you put together a consistency matrix. So go back before you submit, look at your consistency matrix. Make sure that you talk about the same variables all throughout. Don't introduce new variables in the next step. If the variable did not appear here, you can't introduce it in either the hypothesis, the research questions, or under the variables or the questionnaire. It must all be consistent. I hope this video will help you to put together a good consistency matrix, because your consistency matrix is key to help you when you write your proposal or when you write your thesis, so that you are not all over, but we are focused on the constructs that we have stated to be the constructs that you'll be looking at. Thank you and good luck with your assignment.